Let's get ready to rumble. It's Sunday school versus small groups next on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend, co-host, and future ringmaster, AJ Matthew. I think you've got
available
another
and open
career
to opportunities. Yeah.
If you are in charge of boxing matches, maybe just a good old fashioned bare knuckle brawl,
Cage fights, back alleys, whatever. Give me a call.
MMA. Give AJ a call. He could MC that event for you. Sorry if we blew out your eardrums, but I will tell you, AJ, this is a classic fight. The number of churches we encounter who they really struggle with this.
Mm-hmm.
Should we do small groups? Should we do Sunday school? What is the best possible method for discipleship in the church? And I think we should just rip off the Band-Aid and just say, yeah, they're both good.
Just cut to the chase. We don't have a dog in this hunt. Yeah.
Spoiler alert, it's a draw.
But see, I think the way you just set this up, though, gets to the heart of the issue. And the debate doesn't happen around opposing groups saying, what's the best way to disciple people? I think it's just, what do we like and what have we done? And they never get into how can we best disciple people.
I think that's a good point. And you have people who maybe don't like Sunday school, and maybe they've been going to a church for a long time that has Sunday school, and they go, they're just the kind of person who likes things to be new. They're just contrarian and go, we need to start a small group ministry, just to have something different, to have a different option. Or maybe a church has seen some decline over the years, and they think, wow, if we just start a small group ministry, then maybe that's going to save the church. And so I think as we're going through this brawl for the ages here between Sunday school and small groups, what we want to encourage you to do is to think not what's the best model, but what's best for our context and our church, and what's going to be the most effective approach for the discipleship outcomes that we want to see.
Yeah, exactly. And there's baggage on these names as well. Just like, I think it was just last week's episode, and we were talking about church board stuff. Every time we do an episode talking about elders or council, we have to run through like 3 or 4 names, like whatever you call it, don't get hung up on that. Same thing here. People are like, because they think back, 30, 40 years ago, like, well, this was my experience in Sunday school. This was my experience in small group. And they project that out on, every church worldwide. And they're like, oh, I don't like that. And we've been told by people, Scott, we don't want to be a church of small groups, or we don't want to be a small group church. I'm like, well, what does that even mean?
What do you even mean by that? Yeah, I'll never forget that. Yeah, I think it was someone who was working with you who said, you're just trying to turn us into a small group church. And then you were like, well, first of all, no. And second of all, didn't you point out a ministry that they had? And you were like, what is this thing that meets? And they were like, it's a small group.
It's small groups.
And you were like, wait, what?
I don't.
What are you talking about?
Don't tell us to have more than one small group.
That's a small group, but we don't have small groups. Yeah. So there's a lot of baggage. And I think you mentioned this in the show notes for today, but this is a little bit like the unnecessary battle between traditional and contemporary music. It's like one of these totally unnecessary church fights that we have. And the question really shouldn't be what model or what approach works best. It's in a general sense, but what model or approach or tactic or strategy works best for your folks in your context.
What's best for us? Yeah. First of all, is what we're doing now working to the level in which we think it should, could, or can? So if the answer is no, then okay. Then if the answer is no, then all right, we're gonna do something different. Are we gonna modify what we do? Are we gonna change and do something completely different? Everything should be on the table. I mean, if
Yeah.
we're looking for the best discipleship outcome, let's just figure out what that might be. Or, in
Right.
the context of worship, whatever. Yeah, if we're sold out on like one particular thing and our church is shrinking and dying, then hey, maybe it's worth having a look.
For sure.
But so let's hit some basic definitions though for our context today. We're keeping this pretty broad and basic as far as Sunday school goes. We're talking about a classroom type situation that meets on premise at the church on a Sunday morning, more of like a lecture style. I guess that would be kind of our traditional Sunday school thing, but it
Most
has a lot of
common. Yeah.
variations. Yeah, probably most common, but with lots of variations for the purpose of Bible instruction. Usually it's a singular outcome approach. Mostly, it's Bible study. We're just going to go deeper in the word, and that's good, and right to do.
But there might be some prayer sprinkled in, and you'll definitely
True.
hear folks say,
That's right.
"Oh, I have my deepest friendsps are the people I've been in Sunday
That's
school
right.
with for 20
Yeah.
years or whatever." So there's some fellowship mixed in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. That's kind of a natural outcome. So yeah, you're probably,
But it may be less intentional and more just sort of incidental.
exactly, more incidental outcome of that format of ministry. Small groups, again, and we're going to talk about the way that they could be formatted in a lot of different ways. But traditionally, a smaller group of people than a Sunday school class meeting away from the church, probably in somebody's home on some other night of the week, one or more times a month. It's very broad. Again, probably for the most part, Bible study oriented, Bible instruction oriented, some more so fellowship, kind of usually lean
More,
one way or the
more
other.
discussion
Right?
based.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be more facilitated versus instructional.
True. Yeah. Right. So, these are kind of the general setups of these two things. Your mileage may vary and probably does. So,
right.
Okay.
So what we want to do is maybe just kind of weigh the pros and cons so you can think about what might be best for us and evaluate what you're doing. You may even look at this, like you may even listen to how we describe the pros and cons of Sunday school and kind of assess your own experience and go, well, I don't even know that I'm maximizing all the potential pros. Like you may not need to change your approach to this. You might just need to maximize it and go, I'm not getting the most out of this.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right.
Well, let's run through some of the pros of Sunday school then, Scott. So, probably first and foremost is you've got an audience already there. So people are coming to church. This is what a lot of people would say about, why do you like Sunday school? Well, I'm kind of getting everything done here in Sunday morning. I don't have anything else to schedule. So that they're on campus, they're willing to give you more of their time because they're already there. I mean, it's not a bad reason.
It's a great solution for busy families.
Yeah.
You hear all the time about, well, there's sports and, there are more weeknight commitments now than there were 30 years ago. All true. Very true. A way to make it easier for people to engage is, hey, you're already here. Stay an extra hour. And I actually hear some people rail against this. This would maybe be one of the critiques, I guess, is, hey, people should make church a priority. So they should find another time to come back. And I guess I understand that on some level. And yet, do we need to make it unnecessarily hard? Like, what's so bad about just staying an extra hour? Is that evil? Like, I don't think there's anything actually wrong with that. So it is a good solution for busy families.
Yeah. Your head is kind of in the space and, you're there, you're hopefully getting engaged in worship. You're thinking about the things of God. And so, you can kind of stay more centered there. So I think that's another pro of the Sunday morning class or groups approach. So, yeah. You might get higher engagement. Again, it's connected to the fact that people are already there. So you may get higher engagement, and so those classes may be larger. And if you are more introverted, the larger class experience gives you more anonymity, less personal engagement. So this is a pro from the point of view of an introverted person like me.
Yeah.
It's not seen that way from
Easier to blend
everybody.
in.
Yeah, you can blend in a little bit. So you can kind of, maybe you can get fed, you can get out of it what you would hopefully get out of it. And again, but if it's less discussion based anyway, then that's kind of going to be the nature of it. But so yeah,
if you on that engagement point, AJ, this is I want to interject here. Bo Patterson, I remember speaking to him one time. I don't quote me on this entirely, but I believe that he said that he could expect in a Sunday school based model that he could get a close to 85% engagement, when they're operating at peak performance, 85% of regular attenders attending a class. Whereas in the small group model, he would expect that to be lower, at a peak performance and sort of optimized. He could expect to maybe max out at 70%, between 65 and 70%. So some of what you're saying in terms of it just being more accessible, easier, you're already on campus. I think that speaks then to those percentages probably overall going up. That's something to consider, I think, or to have in.
Yeah, right. Because done well, isn't that what we want? I mean, we want the most people engaged especially if we're really intentional about how they function and what our desired outcomes are. Then more people involved equals greater ministry happening, greater effect in people's lives. So that's a pro. So both, we've got this as a pro for both of them. Opportunity for deeper study on the sermon topic. Not all churches function this way, but if your Sunday school classes are engaged in the same passages of text as was your sermon that week, then that's a great opportunity, especially from the pastor's point of view, because you can't write a sermon that's going to turn into a class, and be super deep, but you can use your Sunday school as sermon part 2 and really get into some stuff maybe that you had to cut out.
Yeah. Or, you could be a week behind or something.
Sure.
But it's an opportunity to explore that topic more fully. And if you have a more lecture style environment, it really may be getting into more of the nitty gritty and teaching people how to study the Bible on their own and how to read the Bible on their own. That can be really good. Also, last pro on this, AJ, another practical thing is childcare. It's just way easier to handle childcare. I'm actually working with a church right now that they don't have enough volunteers to be able to run a whole children's Sunday school program for 2 hours. So they're not doing Sunday school and then also another children's worship during the worship hour. They're just doing children's worship, but they are doing childcare during the Sunday school hour. And I think they're even maybe paying a high school student or a couple high school students to do that. It's just strict childcare. Like it's not a lesson. It's more of a give them a cookie and let them play type situation. But still, it's way easier to do that on Sunday mornings just because you've got more people to pull from on campus to help run something like that versus in the small group environment, it's way harder to coordinate because you have various times and various nights, and it's so hard to get the childcare put together. So the Sunday morning option makes childcare easier, and that is not an insignificant thing when you're talking about families picking something to engage with, because they're like, man, what am I going to do with my kids? Like, I don't want to have to be worrying about my kids in the next room. Are they breaking something or whatever? Like that is something that parents think about a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Super, super high pro on the Sunday school thing is the childcare option. So, and especially if your church is in the context in which you are trying to reach young families, have the potential to reach young families, that's a big deal right there. So, all right. Any of the pros coming to mind for you on this one before we move on to the cons?
No, I think we've sufficiently covered the pros of Sunday school.
Okay, all right. So you Sunday school folks right now are like, yeah, we're winning. All right. So, okay, some of the cons of Sunday school. All right, possibly less personal engagement because of the size of the class. You know, it's going to be larger class, harder to facilitate. You know, any deep fellowship if that's part of what you're going for is fellowship. So yeah, I mean, as you know, I mentioned before, if you're an introvert, this is cool. If you're not an introvert, you're like, hey, this class is so big, I can't really get to know people very well.
Well, and it really even shouldn't be a question of introverted or extroverted. The question is, what's necessary for spiritual growth? And the reality is that what's necessary for spiritual growth is relationship.
Yeah.
You know, we desperately need those spiritual friendships and relationships. And so if I'm going to Sunday morning worship and I'm sitting in a pew or a row of chairs, and then I'm going to Sunday school and I'm sitting in a row of chairs, it's totally possible for me to fail to develop those deep spiritual friendships I need to be healthy. And so that's not just an introvert extrovert thing. It's a question of discipleship. You know, are we fully discipling our folks if we only put them in environments where they can be relatively disconnected? And I would say, no, it's not good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's definitely something that needs to be considered. Another con of the Sunday school ministry is the space needed for it. Now, some churches have space in spades. They've got the education building that has had fewer and fewer people in it over the last 10, 20 years or more.
Man, and a lot of times those buildings are musty.
That's true.
You know, they're just, the deferred maintenance has been overly deferred. And so there's a lot of churches that I've worked with that they wouldn't even feel comfortable using the space because it's in bad shape. I mean, I can think of several just right off the top of my head that I've walked through and they go, we don't use this, you know? So you may have the space, but it may need some love if you were going to start using it.
Yeah. You know, but for you younger churches, you church plants of, you know, the more recent, 10, 20 years, you were coming up on a more of a different building model than of, 50, 70 years ago, and going much smaller space, wanting the church to be more outside the walls. And so you go like, okay, yeah, we've got a staff office, could be a classroom. We got some children's, classroom space, maybe a multi-purpose room if we're super lucky.
Yeah, I'm envisioning adult Sunday school classes sitting in the miniature chairs in the preschool room. Or everybody's just sitting. I don't think we say Indian style anymore. I don't think that's allowed. Crisscross applesauce on the floor.
Yeah, on a mat, colored mats that fit together like puzzle pieces. Yeah. So yeah, depending on who you are and how your church is, space maybe is not a problem, but for a lot of people that is a problem. And especially, if you're somewhere in the middle, you're like, yeah, we've got 4 classrooms. Well, okay, we've got room for 4 Sunday school classes then. What is our long-term growth strategy going to be? Because when we're done with that space, we're done, and it's expensive to add space.
Super expensive. Yeah. I mean, there are some creative solutions to this problem if you really want to go to a Sunday model. And again, it really does depend on what kind of space you're dealing with. But if you've got a multi-purpose room or a fellowship hall, or even your auditorium, if it's only being used, your worship center, if it's only being used one service, and especially if you have chairs, or if you've got a lobby, like any kind of space that you could set up little pods in, you can. And that sounds crazy. I've done it where we actually set up, several small group areas within one larger space because we had room on the perimeter of the worship center to do that. And so we set up in there. It's possible to do it if you're committed to doing it and you think having an on-campus option is good. More likely than not, you're going to have to probably do some sort of a hybrid approach where you've got maybe a couple of on-campus group options, and then you're going to have to supplement that with something that's small group related. And sometimes that's not an option. Like I can think of a church that's about 35 minutes from my house that really started to grow. They were an older church with an older church building, but they had a lot of classroom space, but they were growing at such a pace that they needed all of that space for children's ministry. And they had multiple services, so they needed children's ministry space for every service time. So they just had to go to a small group model out of, as you're kind of describing here, the space constraint and going, we just don't have anywhere to do it.
Yep. All right. Well, so another con is kind of tags on to one something that we brought up in the pro side up there. If people can't attend church because of work or other time constraints on Sunday morning, now they're missing out on kind of 100% of church. It's not like they're like, well, I can never come to worship service because I work on Sunday mornings, but I can come to small group on Tuesday evening. If you're loaded up on Sunday and you're all in on Sunday, then you're knocking out whatever portion of the population isn't available.
Yeah, that's true. I guess related to this, and I guess this is technically true for the small groups as well. But I can think of a couple of churches that I've worked with where people came just to the Sunday school hour.
Yeah, I've heard of that a lot.
And then didn't come to service. And you wouldn't want people to be like, I came to church on Sunday, and they just came to their Sunday school class with their people that they liked, and then they didn't engage on Sunday morning. I guess the same thing could happen where someone could attend a small group but then not go to church on Sunday.
Yeah,
I think that's less likely because someone who's inclined to do that probably, I'm making so many assumptions here, AJ, is probably someone who likes to be seen at being at church. So they come to Sunday school hour, they're seen by a bunch of people and go, oh no, that person is still going to church, but they're not actually attending the service. They're just coming to their class. So I think that's less likely to happen in a small group because it takes a higher commitment type person to go to a small group than it takes to go to a Sunday school class.
Yeah.
But it could be a problem for either option. You don't want people just attending.
Yeah, that's a dysfunction regardless of the type of ministry, for sure.
For sure. That should be a red flag for your church. If you see that happening a bunch, you should be going, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why is this happening?
Yeah. I've heard of a lot of instances of this where people were going to either Sunday school or small groups and not were protest something, the pastor did something, got under their skin. And so they'll show them by not going to church, and hearing them preach anymore. So yeah,
anecdotally, if this feels more common in Sunday school churches, I don't have any hard evidence to back that up other than my own personal experience. But this seems to be more common in Sunday school churches than small group ones.
Could be. Yeah. All right. So there you go. Some Sunday school cons. Any other cons on the Sunday school come to mind for you?
No, I mean, again, you can mitigate some of these cons, particularly like move to circles versus rows in Sunday school class, and you can mitigate that. Like you could manage the size of any of these things. Like there are things you could do to mitigate some of these cons, but they are just more natural to occur in these environments.
Yeah. Well, so here before our time is done today, we'll some ideas on both sides of this debate. What can we do to think outside the box and make or both of them work? So, all right, let's shift over to small groups. Pros for small groups. Well, and maybe it's a pro for some and not a pro for other, but the flexible meeting times and days.
Yeah.
That as we were just talking about, Sunday morning might knock out people, whereas another day of the week might work for somebody else.
Yeah. Or you may have a situation where, man, their kids can't be at church for 2 straight hours. Like the kids will go nuts, or or you have a situation where you've got a kid who's sort of in napping age. And so the idea of being at church for too long doesn't really work because they got to get the kid home by a certain time for nap time. So small groups give some flexibility, some options for being able to handle those various life situations. Of course, the challenge is there's no way for you to offer enough small groups to accommodate every person's unique scheduling situation, but it does at least provide more choices than you would get in a typical Sunday school situation.
Yeah, there you go. So another pro in the small groups, typically kind of more traditional Sunday school versus more traditional small group, is greater relationship growth, greater actual biblical fellowship opportunity in the small group model. Mostly because it's a smaller group of people there, and it's not a lecture style situation usually. So, it's just more of a natural human setting in which conversation is more open, more time can be spent getting to know each other.
Yeah, I would say on that same note, similar to that, it also provides different kinds of ways to connect or work together. So, it's difficult to see how a whole Sunday school class might necessarily do some sort of a service project or outreach. Not impossible. I mean, that happens sometimes, but it's really easy to see how a small group might go and serve in a soup kitchen or whatever, because it's fewer people's schedules to coordinate. It's easier to maybe pick a project or something to work on. And because it's not on a Sunday morning, you could actually take your normal regular meeting time to go maybe and do something, because it's maybe in a time that's more conducive to that sort of thing. So it opens up more kinds of options of things groups can do together that you maybe don't have in a traditional Sunday school setting.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And then another pro that we also listed as a pro for Sunday school, that's the opportunity to go into a deeper study on the sermon topic from that week or the previous week, or really on any topic. You just have the time to be able to spend. I think this is definitely angle on this is that the church, pastoral leadership in the church, is kind of curriculum or questions or outline or something. That becomes something that is added to the work of the staff to be able to develop this. But it really is a pro for either one when the church is consistent across teaching. The topics are consistent. Then you're able to more predict. You're certainly able more to predict what are people going to learn. If we know what's being taught, we know the potential for learning.
Yeah.
And
We obviously, you and I have a real bias for this. We like sermon-based studies, and we like it being across the whole board. That's not something you necessarily have to do, but it's something that we like for unity's sake and for that. Definitely in the small group context, though, whereas in this Sunday school environment, you're likely to be able to add additional content. In a small group environment, it's probably going to be more of a deeper dive into the application. What did this sermon mean to me? How does this apply to my life? Because it's more discussion based and more of a facilitation versus instruction. You probably shouldn't look at the small group as a great place to give all kinds of extra detail. That environment's not really conducive for that, unless you do something like shoot a little video that small groups watch before they go into discussion. So maybe you can give 15 extra minutes of content and instruction, and then go to that application component. But by and large, the deeper dive on the sermon topic is going to be more around application than it is around instruction.
Could be. Yep. And we're dabbling now into thinking outside the box. Don't get locked into thinking either one of these is always the same thing all the time. All right. Let's see. Any more pros on small groups, Scott?
Yeah, no, I think the main one is it's just more relational, and it's more flexible.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right. So some of the cons of small groups. So first-time visitors, either new to the church or just new to engagement in small groups, I think for most people, it would be easier to walk into a classroom with people at church than it would be to drive to somebody's house, knock on the door, walk in and figure out,
Yeah.
okay, who are these people? What's happening here? How does this work? And,
Yeah.
do I need to be
You
prepared to
want to
run
hang out with
away?
strangers? Would you like to go to a stranger's house? Yeah.
There's probably more people are like, "Ugh, I just don't know if I'm ready for that." Um,
Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely a con. Also a con is I mentioned this earlier. It's the childcare, man.
mhm.
Figuring out that childcare is a real problem. I mean, what do you do with your kids? Are they going to be there in the same place? And I got to be honest with you, I have heard nightmare stories about this. I mean, I don't want to go into too far detail, but you can even have abuse things that happen when you got some older kids with some younger kids and they're all playing upstairs and they're unsupervised. That's not good. So, I mean, that's like a nightmare scenario, worst case scenario, unlikely to happen, but it's not impossible to happen. And it has happened and it does happen. And so it's great if you can have some supervised childcare happening, but it's really hard to coordinate that when you've got multiple groups at multiple times.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Been in numerous small group scenarios that have worked a lot of different ways, and I'm not sure I've ever landed on the perfect one. So, yeah, who's going to take care of the kids? Like I've been in some where like a couple was designated. This week this couple is going to have stuff for the kids to go on. Well, obviously they're missing out on the time with the other adults during that. Or is it the kids doing it? Is it one lady doing it? So or are small groups meeting up at the church on another night of the week? This is another outside the box thing. It's kind of a hybrid where we're utilizing space up at the church and we have room for kids then, or maybe even volunteers doing childcare. So but regardless, childcare situation is a con on the small group side of trying to figure out how to manage that.
Yeah, for sure. It just takes some extra effort and some time. I think that another con to small groups is how do you connect someone into the right small group?
Yeah.
Are you doing it? Is it age based?
Mhm.
Is it life stage? Do you have weird names for them? Are you doing all the same curriculum? Are you doing different curriculum? And how do people know? I've been in this situation just on a personal level recently, and it's really hard to kind of figure out what's the best fit here. And you're just kind of guessing. You're like, I don't know. Because if you don't know the people personally, if you know them personally, then you go, oh, I'm just going to go with my friends. But if you don't have those established relationships, then it's much, much harder from an individual level to sign yourself up for a group, but also difficult from the leadership perspective to connect someone into a group. You don't want to stick them in something where they're going to hate it. So that's really hard. And that's less likely to be a problem in a Sunday school situation because it's really easy to move Sunday school classes. If they're all on campus, you can be like, well, this one didn't work, but I can go next door. If you go to someone's house one week and it's not a good fit, it's really awkward then to see that person at church and be like, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't really like your small group. I thought your house smelled funny or whatever,
Yeah. Yes, these are challenges for sure, no doubt about it. And kind of along that same line, breaking into those relationships, I mean, if there's a small group that's been meeting with 3 couples for the last year, and here you come along and maybe your church maxes out at like 5 couples and then that's a closed group or something. So you walk in to relationships that have been going for months or years. That's not easy. No matter how even open and how much effort those hosts, and other people put into it, you're never going to be up on the inside jokes and the things that they've experienced together. It's tough. So, putting yourself into a smaller relationship pool is difficult. The best case scenario in this usually is a new small group is launching and a bunch of people get together that they don't know each other, and you form relationships from scratch.
Another con related to this, I think, is it's harder to recruit small group leaders, particularly if they're hosting in their home. I mean, they have to be willing. Sometimes the host is different from the teacher, but even that's hard because now you're having to recruit a host and a teacher, or you have to find someone who's willing to host and teach. I think that's a lot harder, especially in our culture now, where we are less likely to just we don't have a hospitality based culture as much anymore anyway. We don't, again, speaking mainly even for myself, like the thought of having people over, it induces stress. Like, okay, the yard's got to be in the right shape and the house has to be in good shape. And, we've got 2 small kids who can make messes as quickly as we can clean them up. And you don't want people to judge you for how, for any of this stuff. And do we have to have food? And, when you've got 2 people in a house that are working, and the thought of making sure the house is perfect and the yard is perfect and the food is there, like that's a tall ask. It's way easier to get people to say, hey, well, you teach this class, just show up on Sunday and it's ready to go. Yeah, that's way easier. Plus those, you can usually have more people in them, so you need less of them. So, I mean, the recruitment for small group leaders is a con because it's usually pretty hard. Again, you can mitigate this by either hosting this small group less frequently. So you don't need to have the group maybe doesn't meet every week. Maybe they meet once or twice a month. So you don't have to have your house ready all the time, every week. Or you don't host, maybe a small group doesn't meet in a house. Maybe it meets at a restaurant or a cafe, or, like you mentioned, some other environment on your church campus. You can have small groups that meet different nights of the week on your campus.
Yeah.
So there are ways to mitigate that challenge, but it is a challenge, I think, when it comes to small groups.
Yeah. So one of the cons, so a pro, again, on the small group, maybe it does only meet twice a month. The con to that, if you have something and you have to miss one of those, now you're going a full month without being re-engaged with those people. So, it gets messier and messier the more you
the more you go in. So I think this is a good spot then to kind of start to land this plane. I hope now, dear listener, you can see that it's a draw. There's no clear winner between Sunday school and small groups. But you have to know, what is our facility? What kind of leaders do we have? What quality of teachers do we have? What kind of curriculum do we want to do? What, maybe most importantly, what are the discipleship outcomes that we want to see? And given all of those factors, which approach or blend of the two, because you can do some hybrid things, gives us the best advantage at achieving the discipleship outcomes that we have set. And we've actually done a couple of episodes, I think, about discipleship outcomes and how to set those. So we won't go too far into that. You can find those episodes and listen to them. But, that I hope this has maybe given you some pros and cons to think through, not what's best, but what's best for us.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, for sure. What I would love people to take away from this is that there obviously are pros and cons to either one of these, especially if you consider it from a traditional sense of how they functioned. Think outside the box, because there are so many nuanced things that you could do to make it work better for your church. First of all, toss those names out. If there's baggage with these things, small group and Sunday school, there is nowhere in the Bible that says you need to call either one of those that. So be creative. Think about hybrid things. I mean, maybe we want to be a church of small groups, but they meet on campus, or some meet on Sunday, some meet other days of the week. Just don't get locked into a particular way of thinking and throw the baby out with the bathwater, because you might be able to create something that has a little bit of this sprinkled in and a little bit of that, and it's awesome. And it just really hits all of the things that you're trying to do and works well for your church. So, I think
on that
that's
note,
the biggest
AJ,
barrier is getting your mind outside of the space of tradition.
Yeah. And I think on that note, AJ, I think it's important to say here, what matters most is communication. You want there to be clear. How do you want people to engage? I don't think it's good for you to have, we do Sunday school and we do small groups and we do Bible studies and we do men's ministry and we do women's ministry. I mean, that is what we want to get away from, because people just see that as a menu of options that they don't know what's critical and what's not critical. So we do want to have one primary ministry, but if that primary ministry looks like a blend between Sunday school and small group in the traditional sense, great. But let's just be sure we put some language around that we can communicate, that people understand, and people know, okay, if I'm going to engage with the church in this step in our discipleship pathway, I know exactly how to do that and what that looks like and why it matters. And the communication of that really, really makes a difference. So the expression of it, the model that you use, can look like Sunday school, can look like small group, can look like a hybrid approach. But having people understand how to connect and why it matters, that's what I think matters the most.
And then be all in. If you're halfway, your people will be halfway. If it's not important enough to you to talk about how important it is and to really drive it and grow it and make it better and better constantly, everybody will see that and they'll be like, oh, whatever. They're not that interested in it, so neither am I. So,
or if you're talking about that just as much as you're talking about the chili cook-off that's happening next week, people will go, this is the same in importance.
Yeah.
People need to see, no, this thing that we're doing, it's we want you to engage in the worship service, and we want you engaged in this thing, and people need to see it, equate it in their mind as of equal priority. If it's blended in with every other thing that you're doing to fill your calendar in terms of importance level, don't be surprised when people don't take it that seriously.
Yep. So there you go. And you know what? This is one that I think our listenership is all over the world. And I think this one applies to pretty much anybody in any context. So
definitely
great. This was a really good one to jump out. So awesome. And as I said, listenership all over the world. We are a global ministry, and we're a nonprofit ministry that needs the support of the church in the United States so that we can provide resources at no cost to our friends in the church all over the world. So if you'd like to get in on that and partner with us, head over to malforsgroup.com/donate for more information, and then drop us a line at leadership@malforsgroup.com. And let's talk about how that can work for your church and in your missions budget. And we will be back again next week. But first, also, while you're on Malfors Group website, go to malforsgroup.com/158, because this was episode 158 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. And today's show notes and article are over there with a little bit more info about what we talked about today. Share this with some other staff members or ministry team members over at your church so that everybody can get on board with this. You can watch it over on the YouTube in addition to listening to this, if that's what you're doing. If you are on YouTube, hey, glad you're here. Nice to see you. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
To be seen, because we can't see you. That's not how YouTube works.
What?
Yeah, it's not a two-way thing.
Why they can see us. I can see you, Scott. I can't see them.
We can't see them.
I'm always the last to know.
Well, we'll see you next week.
Bye.